So episode 110, the purpose of money. Cha-ching. So yeah, this is so where did this topic come from, Jerrod? I remember that you were saying somebody approached you, or maybe you put out a post or something of like, hey, community, like, what do you guys want to hear? And someone was like, you guys never done a financial or money
Yeah.
episode. And we're like, whoa, you're right. Do you remember who that was?
I think it was Dustin, one of the guys from
Okay.
the gym that loves listening
Yeah.
to us and will be hopefully joining us in Florida later this year.
Nice.
Yeah, because he was talking about having similar experiences about just the emotions that go around money and just like the stress of it. So he had asked that maybe we could dive into something like this.
Nice. Well, shout out Dustin. Appreciate the
Yeah.
suggestion.
So tell them real quick, what was your post that like was able to be perceived as greed? Do you remember?
Yeah. So I shared a post and said that how much money you make is a byproduct of your value creation in the
Yes.
world, which is something that I believe, and it really made me reflect on what I've been doing with my life for the past 6 years in my business. And I think that I haven't been able to scale to this next level of financial abundance that I have because I'm not scaling the amount of value that I'm creating in the world. So like that idea really resonated with me and I shared it, but someone reached out and their first thought, even though there was nothing in the post about greed, was automatically talking about how lots of money can be greedy. And honestly, I didn't give much energy even
No.
into reading into it. So I don't think that he was saying like if you make a lot of money, you're greedy. He was I know the guy, he's a good guy. He was trying to stay kind of neutral. But he was talking about greed and I was like, hey, like why I'm
Right.
curious, why does greed come to your mind when we're talking about money? Because money is neutral. Right. So let's dive right in, Jerrod.
I
So
love it. Can we stop right there for a second?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I love that post, and I 100% agree that if you want more money in life, if that's your driving force, you have to create more value, right? And
Mhm.
I think if we all looked at like how my value bank instead of bank accounts, like what value am I bringing to the world? One, the byproduct, just like you said, would probably for most people be an increased wealth, tangible things, whether it's money or whatever it is that you're measuring wealth off of. But two, you would be making the world a better place every day, right? And if we could put our weight on what kind of value did I bring today, that the byproduct is influence, right? And people are always like, I always hear this one, like cops or teachers or the military needs to get paid more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, why don't teachers get paid a whole lot? It's not that they're not worth it. It's just there's so many of them, right?
Yeah.
There's so many that there's not a ton of value there as far
Right.
as monetarily. Now, as you progress up, like why do principals make more than the teachers? Well, there's additional roles, but there's also fewer principals, right? It's
I'm
a
so glad you brought that up.
supply and demand. If there's less of me, I can charge more for me. If there's a bunch of me, like when I go into the Air Force or the military, and there's 8,000 basic airmen basic, the lowest level in the Air Force, our value is not very much because I'm one of 8,000. But if there's
Yeah.
only 6 4-star generals, his value or her value is worth a ton more than mine because there's only 6 of them. So,
Yeah.
because it's personal, we don't want to look at the laws of supply and demand.
Right. So the laws of supply and demand 100% apply. And I'm really glad that you brought up teachers because that post definitely hit some heart. So I got another person who direct messaged me and was like, I completely disagree with this statement. Like, what about teachers? And I didn't think of the supply and demand application, but that's also true. But I shared with him that it's some teachers are way better than others, right? But they get paid the same. So they're in a system that determines your value, regardless of how much value you're really contributing. I mean, this post was mainly geared towards entrepreneurs, business owners, because as an employee, it is your value is dictated by your supervisor, your the owner of the company, and what skills you're bringing to the table. However, you can be a lot more valuable than you're getting paid for when you have when you're in the corporate world. Like there's limits to the value that you can create. And even as a teacher, you're limited in what you can teach. You can't teach whatever you want. You're put into a box and you have to follow the rules box. Courtney, she would get in trouble all the time because she would do these unique things of trying to get children to think for themselves and have these awesome exercises, but she would get in trouble with like the principals and supervisors and be like, hey, like this isn't the standardized testing of what we're told to teach these students. So I think that argument as well for teachers like shows that you're limited in your value creation.
Well, and here's one I always go to, right? When people are like, oh, I can't believe athletes make $250 million for 10 years to play a game. And I'm like, well, let me ask you this. When was the last time 45,000 people came on a day to watch you work? Never, right?
Exactly.
The fact that he can or she can make $250 million is because every time they play, 45,000 people pay their hard-earned money to go watch them do their job. So if we don't want that, like if we're like athletes shouldn't get paid, just quit going to the games. Don't watch them. And if you don't watch them, if now all of a sudden attendance at a sport goes from 45,000 to 20,000, and it stays that way for a while, all their payroll will have to come down because they're not making as much money on the ownership side, right? Like it's relative for all of us. If we want more money working, we have to be more unique in what we bring. The more common we are, the more replaceable we are, and I think that's where. Honestly, I think that's where sometimes people get poor feelings towards money is they confuse the two. Money is a means to buy tangible things in my world. It's just a thing, right? Just like this table, that's a thing. The computer's a thing. This plant's a thing. They're things. They have no feelings. They don't like me. They don't dislike me. They're things. But my value is how I feel about my contribution to the world. And I think they're two drastically different things. But for some reason, for many of us, we associate how much money I have with how much value I have to the world. And I would argue, as we're going to talk, I see some of our questions that we'll discuss, if we keep them separate, at least in my life, I found I've made more money when I've kept them separate versus assigning emotion to the money.